Welcome to the webinar. We'll get started shortly. Before we begin, here's how to earn CPE credit. Unlike traditional CPE webinars, there are no polling questions or attendance checks during the presentation. Instead, you will demonstrate your knowledge by taking a brief multiple-choice quiz in the Earmark app. Search for the free Earmark app from the App Store or Google Play Store, or scan the QR code on the screen. Open the app and create an account. Be sure to use a valid email address because we'll email you your CPE certificates. From the home screen, scroll down to find the course. You can also tap the magnifying glass icon to search for the course. Tap on the course artwork, then the Enroll button. On the Course tab, you'll find the recording and quiz questions. If you don't see the quiz yet, don't worry. We'll email you when the quiz is available. Complete the quiz to earn your CPE certificate. If you have questions or need help, email us anytime at support@earmarkcpe.com. Now, on to the webinar.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Unlock the Potential of Your Firm, Discover the Power of a Fractional CLO Chief Learning Officer. I'm Joel from the Earmark team, and if you have any questions or concerns or comments, please feel free to use the comments section and I'll respond to you as soon as I can. And with that, I will turn it over to our host for today's webinar, Nancy.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. Today, as said, we're going to talk about how to unlock the power of your firm by discovering the power of a Fractional Chief Learning Officer. So would like to know, first off, if everybody is ready to get this party started. All right, let's talk about just what is a Fractional Chief Learning Officer and why is it important and how can it help you? First of all, by bringing in a Fractional Chief Learning Officer, it's a very cost-effective, flexible approach. The services are all customized to you, and you have somebody that brings a fresh perspective. And really, it all comes down to what can you do to improve the performance of your employees and increase your customer acquisition and retention. We're going to talk about each of these categories in our time together today, as well as a proven methodology that makes all of this happen. So the first thing I wanted to say is it's really having a collaborative partner, someone who comes at it from different type of expertise. So my whole career has been in learning and development, kind of been there, done that, seen it all. So I'm able to really help you look at things from through a different lens and collaborate with you to make things really happen. As I said, it's a fresh perspective. It's a whole nother point of view. I'm also able to look at what are the current trends in learning and development and what can you do to be able to deliver high quality programs using the latest and greatest tools, and sometimes going old school and just doing an in-person class is the best way to go. It's very cost effective and very flexible because you're only going to pay for what you need when you need it. You don't have to worry about investing in somebody that's going to be full-time working on learning and development for your firm or pull people away from revenue generating activities to take responsibility for handling learning and development for your firm. So it's a great way to kind of bring in what you need when you need it. And all the services are customized to exactly what you need, whether we're looking at upskilling your employees, looking at what you can do to acquire more customers and what you can do to help train your customers in terms of what's the best way for them to engage with you so that you can deliver the best service possible. So let's really focus on what I think is the heart and soul in all of this for most companies, which is really what can you do to improve the performance of your employees? How can you ensure that they are aligned with where you want to go? What can you do to reduce the costs? You know, if you've got people that you bring them in and they're very skilled. They're skilled as an accountant, they're skilled as a bookkeeper, but they need to learn, well, how do things work in your firm? What do they need to do to be successful? And oftentimes it can be really challenging to kind of move them forward. And we can forget that they don't necessarily know kind of what the way of working is expected. So for example, I worked with a bookkeeping firm and they specialized in construction. Well, they were bringing in bookkeepers that had experience, but they needed to really learn about what's unique to the construction business, what were the different tools that they used in order to be successful so that they could do the best job for their clients. And there was, always a challenge around bringing people in and getting them up to speed as quickly as possible. Because if you do this, if your costs go down, if you increase your efficiency, the end result is you're going to be more profitable. And it all comes down to really making sure that everybody is well prepared to do the job. It all starts with, how do you onboard people? What happens that first day? How long should the onboarding period be? People look at this from different points of view around, well, is it one day? Is it welcome? And here's your desk, and just, let's just get down to it. Or do you need to do something that is a more gradual approach, but not so gradual that people never get out of training? But what should that time period look like from the time they walk into the door until the time they can work independently? And the more systems and processes that you have in place that are clearly documented, where there's an opportunity for people to participate in training and then be able to refer to how do I do something after the fact if they don't fully remember the task. So it's really being very strategic about day one to being successful. It's not just day one, let's have a nice lunch and talk about culture, but it's what do we do so that we can work very well together as we move forward. So you want to start strong in your onboarding. Then there is the ongoing learning and development. And what do you do to continue to keep people current in their skills? We live in a time where technology is changing. We have to keep pace with what are the different apps out there that we want to use, what type of integration is going to be in place, what's happening, how as regulation changing, our tax laws changing. There's this, there's a continuing new information that's available, it seems like every day. So if you can think about strategically, what can you do to keep people on board, and opportunities to maintain their licensing, getting CPE credit, which all of you that are participating today, you'll get CPE credit for this opportunity. So what can you do to look at not only ensuring that people are staying current and maintaining their license through CPE credit, but how does what's out there and what's available match up with what they need to do to be successful? Because that is a win-win if they can get the credit and they're participating in a program that's going to help them to be successful in their job. All right. Then the next thing we can look at in all of this is, well, what about customer acquisition and retention? So we've said, okay, we've got our employees, they're rocking and rolling, they're doing a great job, but this can also apply to what can you do for bringing in new business to the firm and keeping it. So one example that I like to share is you have a particular specialty. Let's say you work in e-commerce, and actually this is based on a true story. If you were able to provide some short modules, lessons, that talk about what is it like to build an e-commerce business? What are the key attributes? What do I need to keep in mind? And you keep them very short, very tight, and you're providing that and you're dripping it out into the world. When somebody's thinking about who do I want to hire, they're going to remember, those guys, they talked all about e-commerce and they really seem to get me. They understand who I am and what I need to move forward. I'm going to hire them. Then if we flip that to now you've got them, what are you going to do to be able to keep them? So think about when you first are getting started with someone and there's certain activities that they need to complete. There's certain documentation that you need to gather, you need to collect. Well, what if you could come up with a series of videos or other types of short e-learning modules that you can say to somebody, go ahead, take a look at this video. It's going to tell you what all about all the information we need to collect and why it's important. And there'll be a checklist at the end that you can use. So you can sort of take what you might have to say in a meeting, or the type of content that you say over and over and over again, where you feel like, man, I just want to hit the play button and just have the recording start talking because I say this all the time. It can help you to save more of your time because you're taking those basic principles and concepts and you're putting them into another format for your clients to consume. Now, this may not work with everybody. If you have, real high ticket, high volume people, they're probably going to want a meeting. But if you're working with a lot of smaller businesses, this may be a good opportunity to kind of get them engaged, have them moving forward, and it's not taking up as much of your time. So that's a definite strategy to continue. There's also, what can you do to demonstrate that you're keeping current about what's happening in their business? What types of programs could you be offering on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, whatever makes sense for your schedule, so that you're staying front of mind, that they remember kind of who you are and what you have to offer throughout the year. It's also a great opportunity for them to invite their clients, their colleagues, to come into your event, and then you've got the opportunity then to expand your customer base through education. I like to think of it as education-based marketing. I wish I would have invented that term, but I did not, but it really makes sense. So that's what happens on the customer acquisition front. So now, as I mentioned, around this whole thing, if you do all of that through customer acquisition and retention, as this lovely slide says, what happens is you're basically increasing your credibility, you're expanding your influence, you're building trust and loyalty, and it's also another great way to generate leads. So something to really think about on this front. Now, to make all of this happen, and I think why, bringing in somebody whose specialty is learning and development is really important, is because we bring a methodology. We bring a proven, repeatable process for creating courses. I want to spend the bulk of our time looking at this today so you can get a sense of, so what does this mean? What does this workload or workflow look like? We're going to go through each of these phases. It starts with a project scope assessment, where you get an idea of, okay, what is it that we want to accomplish? And then we move into doing some discovery where we analyze both the target audience, whether it's employees or customers or prospects, as well as the content that might be required. Then from there, we go and we do a design blueprint, which really is, what are we going to teach and how we're going to teach it? And that lays the groundwork to create the content. And once the content is created, then we move into implementation. So let's look at each of these phases. So we'll start with the project scope assessment, because that's the first box. Okay, everything begins by looking at having a strategic learning plan. Overall, what are your overall goals and objectives? You think about it from, okay, what do I want to accomplish and why? Are there particular skills that I need to elevate in my employees? Are there particular skills that my customers need to be more effective, which would allow me to be of service to them? Then you step back and you go, okay, what priorities would I set? So some things are time bound. So maybe you brought in several new bookkeepers throughout the year, and we're coming up on the end of the year, and it's going to be time to start working on 1099s after the first of the year. So there's a time bound situation there where, okay, let's make sure that everybody knows exactly what the procedure is to do this correctly. It's time bound. There's other situations where it might be, we're bringing in a brand new application. So we've got to get everybody skilled up to be able to use this new app to be able to support our customers. Sometimes it's stepping back and just looking more generally that maybe there's a gap that you're seeing in what the performance. Maybe there's a certain number of questions that people keep asking, or you're having there's a challenge in maybe the bringing in new customers isn't happening in the way that you would like it. There's maybe an opportunity to provide people with some skills to do more selling. Now, people can get sort of wigged out about selling. They're like, I'm not, that's not why I joined. But the fact is, sales is everybody's job, being able to bring in new people. So what type of skills might you need to provide to help people when they're out and they're at a networking event? Well, what do I do to do a great 60-second introduction? What do I do if I'm called on to do a presentation? How can I do a presentation where not only am I imparting great information, but I'm seeding opportunities for people so that they'll want to work with me in the future? So it's really thinking through what is it that needs to be accomplished, what's going to happen, and put it into some type of a schedule or framework to say, okay, this is what we want to do, and this is the timeline that we want to accomplish it in. Now, the next phase in our project, we're moving along here, is discovery. Now, as I mentioned, this is where we want to learn more about who is our target audience. And this is where you're looking at either your staff, your prospects, or your customers. And each one is going to have a different set of needs that you're going to want to work through. And then I'm going to really focus now on more on the employee side for this part, because in this instance, it's a great idea to create what I call a competency model. And a competency model is really defining what are the tasks that a particular job role needs to perform, what skill do they need to perform the task, and what knowledge do they need to be able to perform the task. And you want to look at this from two angles. A competency model is great because you're defining what your ideal employee looks like in the different roles. And it helps you to determine what level do you want to get someone to. And then it can set criteria not only for what would go into your curriculum, but what attributes, what skills, what knowledge are you looking for when you're hiring people, so that you have a sense of, well, what is the gap that I'm trying to fill. So you really look at, what are your expectations? What's the current reality? And the gap between that is what we would want to close. Now, it's important to note that training solutions are only going to solve challenges around knowledge and skills. If there's issues around motivation, if there's issues around the tool set, unless they don't know how to use the tool, a training solution isn't going to solve that. And oftentimes, people will come to me and they'll think that they have a training problem when really it's an issue around motivation. And you can train and train and train and train, but if people aren't motivated to do the job, the training isn't going to make any difference at all. Then the next thing in the process here would be to do a learning audit, to look at what do you already have in place and what's working well, what's not working, or what might just need to be tweaked to level it up and improve it so that it can fit the bill. And by going through this process, you get real clarity around what do I have and what do I need, and it can help determine where to start. I'm working with someone now, and they've got a great program. It's a little bit old, it's a little bit dated, but it works. So we wouldn't necessarily have to invest a lot in that. It just needs a facelift. We've also identified places where there's pieces that are completely missing, and it kind of ties into the types of mistakes that are continually being made. So we can look at, okay, how do we, that's a place where we might want to put more attention on building something that's going to solve a current need or problem, as opposed to doing a facelift on a course that's working well. Those are just different things to think about as we're going along. It also helps in part of this work when we're doing our discovery. So we've looked at who our audience is, who are our people, who do we need to help. We've looked at what type of courses do we already have in place, but then it's also good to look across all of your content inventory. What types of documentation do you have? Are there podcasts out there that could be beneficial to people? Do you have videos? What have you already produced in newsletters, blogs, anything, any content that you have that exists in any form? Because the beauty of doing the content inventory is you don't have to start with a blank sheet of paper. You've got a place to start to build your content from. So it's a great tool to have as we're moving forward. So this whole part in doing all of the discovery, it's really important to be clear on who is it that you need to help, how many roles, if you're looking internally, do you need to be supporting? What is it that you want them to do, get real clear on what are the expectations for the job, and then look at, okay, now where are they? What's that gap? And then to look at, okay, then now we have a clear idea of the content that we need to create to close that gap and to get everybody operating and as efficiently as possible. Now, one of the questions that comes up oftentimes when I'm working in this phase is, well, why do we even need to go through all of this? Why don't we just start creating? Let's just start building now. The problem with doing that is you start then running down a road to build something that may or may not be important. It may or may not really be required. It particularly, people are looking at doing this from a monetization of expertise point of view. They just want to take off and go. And if you don't really step back and go, well, what does my audience need? How am I uniquely qualified to solve that? You could end up building something that isn't going to matter. Or sometimes with employee training, the old term around the squeaky wheel. You might have somebody that's complaining about, being unsure about how to do something, and you want to step back and go, is this a one-off? Is this something where one person might just need some coaching and mentoring in order to get to the skill level that we need? Or is this something that is a common problem across everybody? Because it comes down to, where do you want to focus your valuable time and attention? You want to focus when you're building out your curriculum on where is the highest need? What do people do the most often? What's the most difficult? So it's looking at the frequency of the task and the difficulty of the task. If something could be difficult to do, but if you only do it once a year, it's probably not a great use of training. That would be a time to look at documentation as the result and a way to point people to it. So what's important in this discovery phase is we're sifting and sorting. We're looking at, who are the people? What do they need? What is the right content to put into place, and to start thinking about, well, is this really going to be something we can solve with training? Is this something that needs documentation? Or is there something else that's going on? Part of what you can discover in this phase too is there may be people that they're not a good fit, and you can invest a lot in training someone, but if they're not a good fit, all of the training isn't going to matter. So I hope that makes sense. Now we're going to take a look at what happens in the design blueprint phase. So we've gone through, we've collected all this information. Now it's a question of, okay, how am I going to put all of this together so that it makes sense? So the first question when you move into the design phase is, what is it that you're going to be building? To be thinking about it from the perspective of, do I want to go down the road of, is it going to be an online learning opportunity? Is it going to be live online? Like this particular program today with Earmark, It's live today, but it's going to be recorded and it'll be safe for people to look at in the future. There's different, constraints and opportunities depending on what you choose. There's also an opportunity to do things in person. Thank goodness that we're on the other side of the pandemic and we can all leave the house again. But what I would challenge all of you to think about is it's probably not any one of those three. It's probably a combination of all three, and to put it together in a way that's going to make the most sense. And one of the key questions to ask along the way that comes up is, well, how do I choose? And one of the factors to think about is how much feedback is required to perform a task. Now, this example is a little bit out there, but I did some work for Pacific Gas and Electric in their welding curriculum. And there was a lot we could teach in the online format around the math skills that they needed. They could watch videos about seeing people weld, but eventually they had to pick up the torch and somebody had to give them direct feedback on their performance. Well, now as technology has changed, we're moving into the space of augmented reality. So there's some work that people could do to establish muscle memory and do some reinforcement and not have to worry about all the equipment. But there's still that feedback loop that's required, that opportunity for someone to interact with them. So that's something to think about when you're putting the program together. There's also, do you have people, is your workforce in one location? Are they in multiple locations? How costly is it to bring everybody together? There's good reasons to bring everybody together, but then oftentimes it's tied into perhaps a celebration or some larger event where learning opportunities are a part of it. The other phase and all things, or not phase, but thing to think about in all of this is our attention spans. I can't talk today. Attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and people want to get the information that they need when they need it. So there's that, I want to get something instantly. I want to consume it right here, right now, because I have a specific question that I need answered. And so that's where short mini modules come into play. But then there's I need to learn something that's brand new. I need to learn about how a new application works. The payroll system has changed. I have to learn how this new system works. I want to go through that from end to end to learn it, but then be able to go back to short pieces and look at it from a reinforcement angle. So it all comes down to looking at who we're trying to serve, what the content is, and now we think about, well, what's going to be the best way to deliver it. The other piece when you're thinking about it from this angle, because we are using technology more and more, this is a technical solution today to bring this program to you. So what needs to be in your tech stack in terms of how are you going to put together your programs? Now, a tech stack is easy if we're talking about doing something that's in person, because that's, you've got your slides, you need a projector, and you have handouts. That's easy. But when we start to move into doing things in an e-learning environment where that's all going to be independent study, we have to think about where are we going to host the platform, what's going to work for using it for internal use for employees, and what's going to work for customers. And there's all kinds of options out there, and they fall into 3 different categories. Now, the first category is a third-party hosted platform, and that's where you buy a package from a provider. Kajabi is a big one out there. Kartra is big out there. Those are more for external use. And it's designed as a learning management system. There are many other learning management systems that work internally, and they really come from the size and scope of the business. And that's something that would be more of an individual conversation. But the whole idea is, you're buying a software application that's designed to handle all of your learning opportunities. It can maintain certifications. The courses are out there. You can generate certificates of completion. You can be tracking what people are doing. So if people are trying to track all of their accomplishments, they've got that available to them. It also works if you're doing training for customers. It's a place where they can come in and they can learn what they need to learn. And you have the ability to set up an email marketing campaign for them. Now, the internal LMSs, as I said, that's a whole nother, that's a big conversation, but it's just important to kind of get this out on the table. There's also the self-hosted WordPress plugins like MemberPress is a good one. There's LearnDash, and those you can use to align all of your courses. The difference is they don't always have an email marketing component tied into them. And then the last place, and this is more if you're thinking about using your training as a lead magnet, you could potentially go on an online marketplace like Udemy, puts a program out there with the idea that people will then learn more about your company and then want to potentially come and have you do work for them. And when you're going and you're looking at making the choice about, well, just where am I going to have this program sit? This is a really brief list of selection criteria. You have to think about the learning experience, what it's going to cost, what's the interface like, how easy is it to use, what are the different types of content that you can put on there, what type of branding is available, what can you do for engagement, is there an opportunity to build a community, what's the reporting like, what's their support like, and is it mobile responsive? Now, I'm not going to say the name of the company, but I'm still waiting for a learning management system firm to get back to me when I was making an inquiry when I was on a project where we were looking at what would be the ideal platform for someone to go on. Well, the fact that, it's been like, oh, no, it's 2 months, they haven't gotten back to me, project's done. So they're out. So if they don't get in touch with you in the sales cycle, there's a pretty good chance that their support isn't going to be that great either. So just something to think about. Then, you think about it, it's important to know, okay, what is it that I want to design toward? Because if I'm looking at doing something that's going to be conducted on Zoom, or in this case today, we're on StreamYard, or if I'm going to do something that's going to be e-learning, that's going to be self-paced, or if I'm do something in person, each of those has different opportunities and constraints that you need to take into account when you're building out your program. The other piece in this is from what's the technology going to be required? You want to get a sense of how is that learning management system going to work? What is it going to allow you to do so that you don't design something that then you're not going to be able to offer because it doesn't work with the particular tools. So it's really all about kind of having a sense of, okay, where am I going and what could this potentially look like? Then you can start to think about brainstorming ideas around, okay, what is it that would be really, really great to provide? And thinking through looking at what do you already have and what's missing and what types of stories could you tell? What would be some good scenarios that you could put in place that could teach the content? So you kind of go through this whole brainstorming activity. And a great way to organize it is use Post-it notes and just put your ideas on Post-it notes on the wall of what you think this could all be. Now, here's the tip though. You want to make sure that you get your course done before the sticky notes fail, the glue falls, and they hit the floor. Just ask me how I know that could happen. Then you look at your audience and say, well, what do I want them to know? And what do I want to be able to do? And how do I want them to feel? This is a key question that should guide you through this whole process. It's all around what do they need to know? What do they need to do? And how do you want them to feel? And everything you do should line up into answering that question so that you don't get off track and fall into shiny object syndrome. Again, ask me how I know that could happen. Then you look at all of this information that you've gathered, all the brainstorming, going through and looking at what you have, and you choose your topics. And it's ideal when the topics that you need to deliver line up with some of the content that you already have, because it makes your job easier. It's also about, how are those topics going to get people to that place to close that gap that we talked about earlier. Then you're ready to move into the course creation phase. So before we talk about course creation, let me just really tell you what the outcome should be when you're at the design phase. So you've gathered all this information when you've done your discovery. And in the design phase, you've looked at, well, what is it? You've got the course that you want to build. You've got a sense of what all the content is that you need to pull together. You spent some time brainstorming and you've organized it into what the different topics could be. And then you step back and you go, okay, if this is what I want to teach, my content, then to look at how do I teach it? So if I'm going to put together a course and I want to put it into an online learning format that's going to be self-study, then I'd want to think through, well, I can use videos here. These are the activities that I want people to do. These are the exercises that they need to complete. And you kind of just lay the whole thing out. So you have a real clear picture of what am I going to do and how am I going to do it. And think of this as, for example, if you were going to remodel a kitchen, you're not going to just go in the kitchen and start taking your sledgehammer and just having at it. You're going to think through, what do I want this kitchen to look like? What do I need to put in place in order to get the new kitchen that I want first? And then you can have the funny games with the sledgehammer. So let's talk now about what's important when we're in the content creation phase. First of all, when you're laying out your course, you want to start with a hook. And the hook is, what's in it for me and why should I care? This is what is going to bring people in and have them decide, hey, I want to listen to what this is in this program today, and I care about what this person is going to have to say. Then you want to connect to what they already know. So if somebody has come to you and, like the example that I gave before, they've been doing bookkeeping maybe in a dental office, and now your firm happens to do work in construction. So what's the difference? How do you move them? So you can make references to general bookkeeping principles and how things are done, and then connect it to where you're going to go. And that creates an anchor where someone's going to be able to remember all of the information. Then you want to provide some type of a roadmap or an agenda so people know, well, what's the journey that you're going to be taking them on. Then the next phase, as they're working through the content, is what it can happen so that they can be involved and they can be engaged and they can be with you. Now, if we were doing this session on Zoom, I would be doing things like saying, type in the chat. I'd be looking, asking you to put you in a breakout room. I would do polling questions. I would do all kinds of different activities that I'm allowed to do within the Zoom platform to keep you interested and engaged. Now, if I was looking at this in doing more of an online independent study course, there's a lot of video in online courses. And sadly, much of the video out there is a long form of a recording. And if you're trying to put together an online course that has several modules, it's great to be able to divide the video into shorter lessons or chapters and then have some type of an activity after each one if you're designing for that particular purpose. So you want to think about, when you're offering something, am I offering it as a recorded event like what we're doing today? People can look at this later as a whole recording end-to-end event, and that expectation has been set that I'm going to get a recording of this event that happened on Pi Day, and is anybody going to get Pi later today? I think I might, but that's a sidebar, I digress. So it's setting that, you're setting the expectation that I'm going to be looking at a recording. If you're offering in something and you're building something more from an online course angle, then you want to say, it's a recording or it's going to be a whole series of modules. Just tell people what it is that you're going to be providing. So when they get into it, there's a match between their expectations of what they're going to get. It's great when we do video to do the best that you can with what you have. So think about, are you going to record in your home office or your in-person office situation and be working from people from your natural habitat, as I am today? Or are you going to go into a studio and shoot it in a studio? And all of these decisions that kind of come around, well, how important is this content? How consistent is the content? How much is it going to change? So to really think about, from a cost perspective, what's the investment that I need to make in video? And the biggest thing that you can, the most important thing that you can do is to look at what can you do to say as much as you need to say in as few words as possible. If you just do that, if you just get a great microphone, if you just have good lighting and a good camera, you're miles ahead of a lot of people that are creating training today. Another key element around engagement is to create meaningful scenarios and meaningful exercises that connect to the content. And storytelling is one of the best ways that you can anchor a point. If you can tell me a story and then bring the point, I'm going to remember that point more than if it's just providing the key point. Now, I'm working on something now for myself that's kind of crazy, where I'm taking a whole storyline around what it is like to be dating at my age and how it compares into not only just personal relationships, but how it compares to business relationships and sales and marketing. Now, the story's in rehearsal now, so I can't tell it today, but connect with me later and I'll share it with you. But it's really thinking about how I can take something in my life that happened to me and then find the point that the story can make around that. So I'm telling you a story about how to tell a story, which is one of the most powerful things that you can do, because so often many of us that are in a professional services type of a space or a technical space, we bombard people with facts and we bombard people with information. And much of it is not remembered, when in fact, there's a great story to tell. I was on a mission several years ago to get testimonials around energy efficiency. And we went all over the state of Wisconsin to collect this information. We went into one factory and they talked about all the different types of energy efficiency measures that they put in place. And they went on and on and on and on and on and on. And it was really just a list of, here's the boxes that we can check. We go out to the car when we're done and someone stops us and says, I just wanted you to know how important putting all of this energy efficiency was to our company. We were able to save a lot of jobs. We didn't have to send as much offshore as we thought we would. Now that was the story to tell. And that's what I want you to be thinking about. Who are the clients that you're serving? What can you do to build in the hero's journey, where you're the guide, you're the one that's helping them make a difference in their business. You're the one that looked at the financials and found the story in the financials to be able to help them to improve their business. And then you can take that story and you can tell it to other clients about, this is what we did. This is what we found. And this is the difference we were able to make for our client. And we can do that for you too. That is the simplest and most powerful thing that you can do to make a difference in any type of training that you put together, whether it's for your employees or for your customers. So next thing around is to come up with images that reinforce your ideas. You probably noticed today that most of my slides are images with keywords, and I'm talking about what's going on the slide. There's not a lot of data on these slides. There's only a couple of places where I needed lists. You want to think about how can you approach your content from that perspective. I had someone come to me and say, I really need to have all this information on the slides so I'll remember it. It's like, well, that's not the way to approach it. You need to learn your content or come up with some type of notes or something that can trigger the idea in your head so that you'll be able to hold your audience's attention. If you have a lot of data on a slide, people are going to read the slide and they're going to tune you out. And with the next thing here, then you want to provide opportunities for practice that will reinforce what are the key points that you're trying to do. So what type of practice do you need to put in place? When do you need people to work in dummy files or fake files before you're going to turn them loose on real client files? How are you going to have the work evolve? What is it that you're going to have them do so that they can gradually move from being in training mode, or not too gradually, so that they can quickly pick the wrong word there, so that you can move them quickly from working with fake data and fake clients to real clients. And then once we get past looking at what the practice is, then there's some sort of an assessment. What can you put in place so that you can evaluate if somebody is doing the work correctly? What checkpoints do you have? And it's great to take a step back and say, well, what would we do to ensure that the files that somebody has worked on are accurate and complete? And how can we take that mindset, that information, and be able to bump it up against their work to be able to go, yep, these people, they've practiced and they're good to go. And then you want to tie everything together with some sort of a summary at the end. So today, for example, we started out looking at broadly, why is it helpful to have a fractional chief learning officer, and then moved into, well, what does a fractional chief learning officer do? And what's the methodology that's followed in order to get from idea to implementation? And then there's post-training activities and opportunities. What do you need to do after the fact for the check-ins when people are transferring from being in training mode to actually doing the work on the job? Oftentimes there can be some type of mentoring in place. There's ongoing training, there's support, really to think about what sets up that culture of learning where people never stop learning, but they're also getting quite a bit of work done. Then finally, we get to implementation. So you've built out your program, you spent a lot of time in thinking about what that end-to-end experience is going to be like. You've created all of the components, and now it's time to turn it loose. You're ready to launch that program. You want to pilot your course, get feedback, make any improvements you need to make, and keep creating and keep updating. Now, oftentimes, I'll put things when I work with people. We'll pilot it. We'll get the initial program out there, and then we'll set up to do updates at specific intervals. Sometimes there's like maybe a quarterly maintenance update, unless there's something new that's highly critical that needs to be put in the course. Then that would be done sooner. So that's what I've got for all of you today in terms of what it is what does a Chief Learning Officer do, and in this case, a Fractional Chief Learning Officer. And I would love to continue the conversation. So by all means, click on that QR code. So let's set up a time to talk and keep going. And I want to leave you with this idea before I turn this back over to Joel this morning, in that it's really important to look at who your customers are and who your employees are, and what from the customer side can you do to serve them? And how can you bring in more educational components to attract them and strengthen that relationship? And on the employee side, what can you do to move them through a continuum of learning to improve their skills so that they can serve all of the customers that you work so hard to attract so that you can keep them? So thank you so much for your time and attention today. It's been my pleasure to share this information with you.
Thank you, Nancy, for hosting today's webinar, and thank you to all of our attendees live and to the people watching on the Earmark app. If you are interested in earning CPE, Blake, I will turn over to Blake and he'll explain that in a short video.
Today's webinar has ended. We hope you enjoyed it. To earn CPE for watching, download the free Earmark app. Scan the QR code on the screen to visit the download page. Open the app and create your account. Use a valid email address where you will receive CPE certificates. Then register for the course. You can search for it by tapping on the magnifying glass icon on the home screen and then entering the name of this webinar. If you're attending the live stream of this webinar, keep an eye out for an email letting you know when the quiz is available in the next few days. Pass the quiz to earn your CPE credits. Then tap the button to email yourself a CPE certificate. Stay tuned for more webinars from Earmark. We appreciate you joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.